I never believed that prosperity was just about money. I always felt, deep down, that there was something more, something the modern world has forgotten, but which still pulses between the lines of history. It was this feeling that led me to search for what many call the lost code of prosperity. It all began when I found an old manuscript, hidden inside a worn cover book, in a small street bookstore. The title was barely legible, but one sentence jumped out at me. What is inside manifests itself outside, that haunted me for days. It was as if those words had been written for me, or perhaps for all of us who have forgotten the language of abundance. Throughout my journey, I realized that the true code to prosperity was never locked away in vaults or hidden in distant temples. It was always within us, in the vibration we emit, the beliefs we hold, and the energy we choose to nurture every day. But this knowledge was corrupted, distorted, and, over time, forgotten. I began following the trails. From ancient Hermetic texts to symbols engraved in temples, they all spoke of the same thing, an invisible force, a kind of universal frequency that responds to our consciousness. Prosperity, it seems, is a natural consequence of being aligned with this energy. And the deeper I delved, the more I realized how far we've been removed from this truth. We've been taught to seek outside what can only be activated within. But there is a way back, a spiritual map left by those who knew that true gold was never the metal, but the light that dwells within those who remember who they are. Today, I want to guide you along this path. It's not a lesson, it's a reunion. And if you've made it this far, maybe it's because you also feel ready to crack the code. At the beginning of my search, I didn't understand why some people seemed to attract prosperity so naturally, while others lived in scarcity, despite trying so hard. Until an ancient phrase completely changed the way I saw the world. The universe does not respond to words, but to the vibration behind them. This thought made me stop, and for the first time, I realized that everything in the universe vibrates, including me. Every thought, every emotion, every belief sends an invisible signal to reality, shaping our lives. Prosperity isn't just something we ask for. It's something we emanate. I began to observe myself more closely. When I said, I want to prosper, my body was tense, my mind filled with fear. The vibration I emitted was one of lack, and that was exactly what the universe returned to me. It was then that I understood that it's not enough to talk about abundance, it's necessary to feel abundance. I discovered that the ancients knew this. In ancient civilizations, even before writing, people communicated with symbols and rituals that were not just gestures, but ways of aligning their energy. They understood that thriving was not about possessing, but about connecting. When the heart, mind, and soul vibrate in harmony, the external world naturally reorganizes itself. And the more I studied, the more I saw this pattern repeated across different cultures. Egypt called it Ka. The Hindus called it Prana. The Chinese called it Qi. They all pointed to the same life force, the energy that creates, sustains, and manifests all that exists. When this energy flows freely, prosperity manifests as a natural reflection of inner balance. I realized, then, that the first step to deciphering the code of prosperity is to learn its language, vibration. It's the feeling that comes before the result. It's the silence between the words, the intention behind the desire. And when I started practicing, something changed. The same opportunities that previously seemed invisible began to appear before me. People, ideas, synchronicities, everything began to fall into place. It was as if the universe was just waiting for me to tune into the right frequency to respond. Abundance, after all, is not something to be sought, it's something you remember. In the midst of my research, I came across a worn parchment, kept in a quiet library in a secluded mountain monastery. The writing was ancient, and it took the translator accompanying me days to decipher it. When we finally read it, one sentence seemed to glow in the dim candlelight: what you believe will become your world. At that moment, everything made sense. The code of prosperity isn't just energetic, it's also mental. Our mind is the first temple of creation, and what we deposit in it becomes the architecture of our reality. I began to understand that beliefs are not simply thoughts. They are commands that shape how energy responds to us. When we believe something is impossible, we close an invisible door on the realm of infinite possibilities. But when we open our hearts to believe, truly believe, the universe begins to rearrange everything to prove us right in believing. It was then that I realized we've grown up programmed for scarcity. Since childhood, we've heard that money is hard to come by, that wealth is for the few, that those who have a lot must have done something wrong. These phrases are modern-day spells, and the scariest thing is that we repeat these incantations without realizing the power they hold. But the ancients knew how to break these spells. They called this process mental transmutation, the act of transforming a limiting thought into a liberating frequency. In Hermetic texts, I found almost poetic instructions. Man is what he thinks he is. Let him think. Then, with divine consciousness, I began to apply this in practice. Every time a thought of scarcity arose, I observed it like watching a passing cloud. And then I rewrote it within myself. I am abundance in motion. Prosperity is my nature. At first it felt strange, but gradually something shifted. My energy field began to expand, and the world reacted differently, lighter, more fluid, more supportive. This is why the second fragment of the code speaks of the mind as a mirror. Everything we believe is reflected back in the form of experiences. Thriving, therefore, is cleaning the mirror until it reveals the reflection of who we truly are, creative consciousness. And the cleaner this mirror becomes, the more the universe reflects our true image, limitless, abundant, and eternal. I remember the exact moment I understood the true power of gratitude. I was alone, sitting in silence, watching a candle flame flicker on a makeshift altar. There was something almost sacred in that stillness. That's when I realized, until that moment, I had been seeking prosperity through the vibration of lack. And then, like a whisper from within, I heard, gratitude is the gateway that transforms what you have into enough and enough into abundance. I thought about how many times I've only given thanks when something went right. And how many times I've neglected to give thanks when nothing seemed to move. The truth is, gratitude isn't a gesture of spiritual courtesy, it's a vibrational key. It's as if it reprograms the energy field and opens a passage for the flow of abundance. I started practicing what I called active gratitude. Not just saying thank you, but feel vibration of gratitude, even when circumstances dictated otherwise. When I looked at my bank account and saw emptiness, instead of fear, I said, I'm grateful because this space is fertile. The new is coming. It was a complete reversal of the world's logic and, curiously, things began to change. I discovered that in ancient traditions, gratitude was considered a form of silent magic. In Egypt, it was part of offering rituals. Among the Andean peoples, it was the basis of some sacred reciprocity with the earth. They believed that when you give thanks before receiving, the universe understands that you already have. And, therefore, multiplies. And that's what I felt. The more I gave thanks, the more synchronicities occurred. The right people, unexpected messages, opportunities that seemed to spring up out of nowhere. Gratitude connected me to a frequency where everything seemed to flow, as if I had finally learned to dance with life instead of fighting it. I then realized that gratitude is not a consequence of prosperity, it is the cause. When the heart vibrates in recognition, the universe moves in response. And in that moment, I understood another piece of the code. Prosperity isn't an external achievement, it's a frequency you sustain, even in the absence of what you desire. Because, somehow, in the invisible, you already have it. For a long time, I believed that it was enough to think positively, feel gratitude, and keep the faith. But as the days went by, I realized something was still missing. The visions I had were beautiful, but nothing fully materialized. It was then that I found, in a fragment of a Hermetic text, a phrase that seemed to resonate directly with my soul. Thought is the seed, but it is movement that gives birth to the fruit. That phrase haunted me for weeks, until, one silent dawn, I understood what it meant. The energy of prosperity is alive and, like all living energy, it needs to move. When we remain stagnant, doubting, waiting for the perfect moment, it's as if we block the natural flow of the universe. Abundance needs a channel. And that channel is us. I began to observe myself. How many ideas had I let die out of fear? How many paths had I rejected because they didn't seem safe enough? I realized that the universe doesn't reward hesitation, it responds to aligned action. Not just any action, but the one born from intuition, from the heart, from the silent certainty that it's the right next step. The ancients called this sacred movement. They knew that every gesture, when made with conscious intention, carries a creative force. A simple step can be a prayer, a decision can be a portal. When I realized this, I began to act even without guarantees, and the result was almost magical. Things began to move around me, doors opened, people appeared, the impossible began to seem natural. I learned that the universe loves movement. He doesn't demand haste, but he hates stagnation. To thrive is to enter the rhythm of life, it's to act with faith, even without seeing the full path. Today I understand that inspired action is the bridge between the invisible and the visible. It is the gesture that says to the universe, I trust. And this trust is the engine that activates everything that is dormant. It was then that I realized the code isn't just about thinking, believing, and giving thanks. It's about moving with an open heart, because abundance does not visit those who wait, it dwells in those who walk. There was a point in my journey when everything seemed to stagnate again. I was applying everything I had learned. I vibrated with abundance, transformed beliefs, gave thanks, acted with courage, and yet the flow seemed to have stopped. It was then that an old monk, with a serene gaze and calloused hands, said something to me that I have never forgotten. He who holds back with fear stops the river from flowing. These words pierced me like a silent bolt of lightning. I realized that, even after learning so much, I still tried to control time, the outcome, the how of things. And control, as much as it may seem like strength, is actually a subtle form of fear. Letting go, I discovered, isn't giving up, it's trusting. It is understanding that the universe knows the way better than our mind. And that takes courage, because it means giving up the illusion of command. I began practicing this new principle like someone learning to breathe again. Every time something didn't go my way, I took a deep breath and said, if you didn't come, it's because you don't belong here. And if you're mine, you'll return perfectly. It was a simple but liberating ritual. Over time, I realized that the more I let go, the more things flowed. Opportunities that seemed blocked began to appear again, but now with ease, effortlessly. It was as if the universe was just waiting for me to step out of the way so it could act. The ancients symbolized detachment with the image of a bird. It can only fly when it soars into the air, without guarantees. Faith is the invisible wind that sustains it. I understood that prosperity is the same. It arrives when we stop trying to imprison it. The energy of abundance is like a river. If you try to hold it back, it turns to mud. If you let it flow, it takes you to new places, always more fertile than the last. And that's how I learned the fifth code fragment. To prosper, you must trust in the invisible. Releasing control is not losing power, it is allowing the greater power to act. Since then, I have learned to say not only I want, but also I trust. And that was the point where the flow began to move on its own, effortlessly, without resistance. It was in a small village, high on a hill surrounded by mountains, that I learned one of the most profound lessons of my journey. There, people had little, but lived in abundance. It was curious. The houses were simple, the shops were small, and yet no one seemed to want for anything. There was always food on the table, laughter in the air, and a sense that what belonged to one, belonged to all. I asked an elderly woman, weaving baskets with her wrinkled, steady hands, what the secret of that serene prosperity was. She smiled and replied, "Here, we don't accumulate things. We accumulate blessings, and blessings only grow when they circulate." That phrase stuck with me. I realized that, in pursuit of my own abundance, I had isolated myself, protecting my plans, my dreams, my achievements. And, without realizing it, I had interrupted the flow. Prosperity, I understood, does not multiply through retention, but through sharing. The ancients called the circulation law. Everything that remains in motion lives. Love, knowledge, money, energy, everything needs to flow. When we give, we don't lose, we make room for the new to enter. I began practicing this consciously. I donated what I didn't use, shared what I learned, offered help where I would have hesitated before. And something magical began to happen. The more I gave, the more the universe gave back to me, and in completely unexpected ways. It was as if the act of sharing said to the cosmos, I trust in abundance, I know there will always be more. I learned then that thriving isn't just about receiving, it's about being a channel through which abundance flows into the world. And when we become that channel, energy is continually renewed within us. Connecting with others is, in fact, a form of connecting with the whole, because prosperity is not an individual reward. It is a living network which pulses to the same rhythm as gratitude and love. In that village, I understood the sixth fragment of the code: the more we share, the more we become part of the stream that never dries up. And it was in this understanding that I realized the code of prosperity is not revealed only in solitude, it manifests in communion. After so many discoveries, I began to notice an invisible pattern behind everything. All the truly prosperous people I have known, and I don't mean material wealth, but fullness, had one thing in common: they knew exactly what they were doing. Because where here, they did not move out of fear, nor out of obligation. They lived in harmony with an inner calling, something that came from the heart and translated into action. That's when I realized this was the seventh fragment of code. Prosperity is a consequence of alignment with purpose. One quiet night, while writing in my journal, I felt something different, a sense of expansion, as if the pieces were finally falling into place. I understood that there is no true prosperity outside the path of the soul. When we try to force something that isn't ours, the flow is disrupted. But when we do what we were created to do, the universe conspires to sustain that movement. I remembered an ancient inscription I found in an abandoned temple in Greece: the gift you receive at birth is the key to the treasure you came to unlock. At that moment, I cried. Because I understood that I had spent much of my life trying to follow paths that weren't mine, believing that prosperity was something external, a goal, a number, an achievement. But the real gold was within me, in what I always loved to do, in what made me vibrate with life. I began to wonder, how many people in the world are trying to be something they're not, and because of this, the flow of prosperity seems blocked? How many stifle their gifts, their talents, their dreams, for fear of not being accepted? The ancients called purpose the divine flame, and they said that when this flame is lit, everything else is illuminated. And that's what happened to me. When I started following what really made sense, opportunities started to appear effortlessly. It was as if the universe finally said, "Now you are ready to receive." I discovered then that purpose is not a pursuit, it is a memory. And when we remember who we are, prosperity comes as a natural echo of the awakened soul. During a period of my search, I confess that I felt impatient. I wanted to see results quickly, I wanted proof, I wanted movement. I thought that, if I did everything right, vibrated high, thought positively, acted with faith, the universe would respond immediately. But life, with its silent wisdom, showed me that haste is the enemy of flourishing. It was in a lavender field in the French countryside that I understood the eighth fragment of the code. A farmer told me something simple yet profound: no seed blooms the day it is planted, but every seed that is watered with faith blooms in its time. These words stayed with me for a long time. I realized that the universe works in cycles, not straight lines. Everything has a divine rhythm, and trying to rush the process is like plucking a flower before it blooms. I began to notice the subtle signs of sacred time. When something didn't happen, instead of getting frustrated, I asked, "Am I still in the planting phase?" And almost always, the answer was yes. There were learnings that still needed to mature, frequencies that still needed to align, people who still needed to cross my path. Divine timing is not delay, it is precision. It's the exact moment when everything falls into place perfectly, without effort, without struggle, without pushing the river against the current. When we are in tune with this rhythm, anxiety dissolves. Because we understand that there are no delays, only processes. The ancients symbolized divine time with the image of the sun and the moon, forces that alternate in balance. The sun represents action, impulse; the moon, patience and gestation. To thrive is to dance between these two times, to act when the heart calls, and to wait when silence demands it. It was at that point that I understood, trusting in the time of life is the supreme act of faith. Because when we believe that everything is moving in our favor, even what seems to stand still, we enter the most powerful state there is, trusting surrender. And in that state, everything blossoms naturally. Neither before nor after, but exactly when it should. In a quiet moment of my journey, I realized that something inside me was still blocking the flow of prosperity. I vibrated, acted, was grateful, trusted in time. But there was an invisible chain that held me back. It was heavy, silent, and came from old hurts, resentments, and disappointments that I carried like stones on my shoulders. It was then that I came across an ancient text, hidden among the yellowed leaves of a Tibetan monastery. While you carry resentment, abundance cannot find your heart. Free yourself, and the river of gold will flow. These words hit me like a soft but deep blow. What was I holding on to? What resentments were still holding me back from receiving? I began to examine my own history, people who had hurt me, opportunities I felt I had missed, broken promises. It all built up silently, blocking the energy I was trying to attract. I realized that forgiveness wasn't for them, it was for me. Each act of forgiveness was a way of dissolving internal chains, of freeing up space within me so that the new could enter. Forgiveness is actually an energetic cleansing. It's like opening doors that were locked by fear or anger, allowing the light of prosperity to enter freely. I started practicing conscious forgiveness. It wasn't about forgetting, nor justifying what had happened, but accepting that the past couldn't be changed and that I didn't need to carry it anymore. Each time I released grief, I felt a weight lift. My body, mind, and energy expanded, and a feeling of lightness emerged, as if the universe were aligning everything for me. The ancients understood this. In almost every culture, prosperity rituals involved not only offerings, but also acts of emotional cleansing, forgiveness, repentance, and reconciliation. They knew that blocked energy prevents manifestation, and that true gold only circulates in free hearts. With forgiveness, I learned that prosperity is more than receiving, it is available. Available to the new, to abundance, to opportunities that could never enter a heart filled with resentment. And that's how I understood the 9th fragment of the code. To release is to receive, to forgive is to prosper. After so much walking, reflecting, and experimenting, I finally saw the whole picture. Each fragment of code I discovered wasn't isolated, they all intertwined, forming a perfect dance of energy, intention, and action. Vibrational thinking prepares the ground, aligning our inner field with the frequency of abundance. Beliefs shape the reflection that the universe returns, while gratitude activates the invisible flow that connects us to the source of everything. Inspired action opens doors that pure intention cannot, and detachment allows what no longer serves us to be released, creating space for the new. When we share, we multiply. When we live our purpose, we activate the maximum potential of each gesture. When we respect divine timing, we trust in the perfect flow of the universe. And when we forgive, we clear the path for energy to circulate freely. Each principle functions as a link in an invisible chain, and prosperity is the natural result of being fully in tune with it. It's like a river. Each fragment is a current that feeds the larger flow. When all the links are connected, the water runs freely, cleanly, and abundantly, and everything around flourishes. I felt, for the first time, that prosperity is not something to be sought abroad, but rather a manifestation of inner harmony. These are not quick fixes or magic formulas. It's about living in harmony with who we are, with our values, and with the energy we want to attract. And that is why the code is lost, not because it has disappeared, but because we have forgotten how to live in alignment with it. But when we remember, life begins to reflect that memory. Every experience, every opportunity, every person who crosses our path becomes part of the same flow of abundance. Today, I can say clearly, the code is not a secret kept in ancient scrolls. It is an inner journey, and every step we take toward alignment, gratitude, conscious action, detachment, sharing, purpose, patience, and forgiveness brings us closer to a prosperous, fulfilling, and meaningful life. And now, more than ever, I want to share this with you. And here I am, looking back at everything I've discovered, realizing that true prosperity has never been found in external formulas or hidden secrets. It has always been within us, waiting to be awakened, remembered, and cultivated. Each fragment of the code, from the vibration we emit to the beliefs that shape our reality, gratitude, inspired action, detachment, sharing, alignment with purpose, trust in divine timing, and forgiveness functions as a key to unlocking not just wealth, but wholeness, abundance in all forms, and the freedom to live fully. The journey doesn't end here. What I've shared isn't theory, it's practice, lived experience, a map you can start following right now. Every small step you take, every internal shift you allow, every choice to vibrate in tune with what you want to manifest is a piece of the code falling into place in your life. If you felt something pulse within you while listening to or reading this story, know that this is your calling. The code isn't just to be known, it's to be lived. It's time to look within, feel the energy you already possess, and allow it to transform the world around you. And if you want to continue this journey, I invite you to delve deeper with me. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and dive into the next videos because we'll explore each fragment of the code in even more detail, bringing exercises, insights, and stories that will strengthen your connection to the prosperity that already exists within you. The lost code of prosperity is no longer a secret. He is here, now, waiting to reveal himself in your life. All you need to do is take the first step, trust the flow, and allow abundance to find its way to you. The time to remember who you really are has come. And prosperity, finally, is within your reach.